We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Aleph from the Beis Meseches Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 41b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing who is the Ben Zakkai in the Mishnah who seems to have been involved in capital cases in the Sanhedrin. The problem is that Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, when he was involved in the Sanhedrin was no longer dealing with capital cases. And the Gemara answered it actually is Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai who was referred to in the Mishnah, but at that time he was a student of the court. He was not actually a judge of the court, but since he was the one that made this particular suggestion with regards to the examinations, the kavua b'shmei, so therefore Rebbe said it in his name and not in the judge's name. The judge has essentially accepted his suggestion. And the Gemara explains why sometimes he's called Ben Zakkai and sometimes Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Ki have a lamed Ben Zakkai have a karilei. When he was learning, when he was still a student, he was called Ben Zakkai. Ketalmud hayoshiv lifnei rabbo, just like a student who sits before his Rebbe. And ki have a limed, when he was already teaching, have a karilei Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. That's when they refer to him as Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Ki karilei Ben Zakkai, if he's referred to in the Mishnah as Ben Zakkai, al shem demei kara, that's just because of that was the name at the time of the particular incident. Since at that time he was called Ben Zakkai, in the Mishnah he's referred to as Ben Zakkai. V'chi karilei Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, but when he's referred to as Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, like in the Braisa, al shem dehashla, that's because that's what his name is right now. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Maisu vadak v'chulu ma bein chakiros v'chulu. The Mishnah said, what's the difference between chakiros and bedikos? By chakiros, if the witnesses say that we don't know, so then we say the testimony is no good. But by bedikos, if they say they don't know, the testimony is good. And the Gemara says, Maya filu shnayim omrim. What does it mean that even if two say that they don't know? Pshita, isn't it obvious? Ki amar echad eini yodea edusan kayemis. If by bedikos, when one of them says I don't know, we say that the testimony is still good. So ki amri beitrei nami edusan kayemis. So when two say they don't know also, the testimony should be accepted. The point over here is that by bedikos they can say I don't know. Why does the Mishnah have to say even by two? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shesha says, Areisha Koi, when it talks about even two, we're actually going on the beginning of the Mishnah, meaning by Chakiros, we're saying I don't know is not good. And this is what the Mishnah is saying. By Chakiros, when it comes to Chakiros, Afilu Shnayim Omrim Yodanu, even if two of them say that we do know, V'echad Omer Eini Yodei, and one of them says we don't know, meaning there are three witnesses in this situation, and one of the three says I don't know, maybe you would think that's good, because you really only need two witnesses, but we don't say that. We say Edusan Betela, rather we say that their testimony is nullified. And Keman, and who is the Mishnah following? Rabbi Akiva, it follows Rabbi Akiva, Demakish Shlosha L'Shnayim, because Rabbi Akiva compares 3 to 2. What that means to say is that in Meseches Makos, Rabbi Akiva says, just like by two witnesses, they're not considered Edom Zomin unless you falsify both of them, so too by three witnesses, you have to falsify all three of them. That's the idea, you treat them all as one unit. And so therefore over here as well, if you have three witnesses and even one of them says, I don't know, we're going to say that Eidos is batal, that Eidos is nullified. But the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, how can you say that this is the interpretation of the Mishnah? That again, the Mishnah means to say that in a situation of three witnesses, if even one of them says, I don't know, then the Eidos is batal by Chakiros. V'Eidusan kayemis katani, but this very line that we're discussing actually says Eidusan kayemis, that we accept their testimony. So we must be talking about some scenario where the testimony is accepted, not a scenario where the testimony is not accepted. And so the Gemara says, Elamar Rava, rather Rava says, Hachi, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Afilu b'chakiros, even when it comes to chakiros, to the interrogations, shnayim omrim yodanu, if two of them says we know, if two of them say that we know, v'yechad omer eini yodei, and one of the three witnesses says I don't know, eidusan kayemis. The Mishnah is actually saying the exact opposite, that in that situation we actually would accept the testimony. Keman, and then who would the Mishnah be following? The lo Rabbi Akiva. It's not like Rabbi Akiva. We don't treat the three witnesses like one unit. Rather, we can say we can get rid of one of the witnesses. Two witnesses are enough, and if one of the three witnesses says, I don't know, we still accept that testimony. And the Gemara continues, Rav Kahana Rav Safra Tanu Sanhedrin Bei Rabba. Rav Kahana and Rav Safra, they learned Sanhedrin by the yeshiva of Rabba. Pagabahu Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama met up with them. Amar Lui said to them, Mayam Risu Bav Sanhedrin Devei Rabba. What are you saying in the Sanhedrin that you're learning by the yeshiva of Rabba? Amri Leisa, they said back to him, Mayam Rinan Bav Sanhedrin greater. So what would we say if we were learning Meseches Sanhedrin in general? Umay Kashalach, what exactly is your difficulty? What exactly is your question? So Amar Lahu, so he said to them, Mehadakatani ma bein chakiros levedikos, because it says in the Mishnah that what's the difference between chakiros and bedikos? Chakiros echad omer eni yodei hidusan betela. When it comes to chakiros, the interrogations, again, those are questions involving the time and the place. If the witnesses say, or if the witness says I don't know, then we say the testimony is batal. But bedikos, but when it comes to the examinations, the general questions about what exactly occurred, Amar echad eni yodei, if one of them says I don't know, know, va'afilu shnayim omrim, and even if two of them say einanu yodim, we don't know, edusan kayemis, we still accept the testimony. And so my question is as follows: Michdi, let us see. Idi v'idi doraisa, both chakiros and bedikos, they're both doraisa. Ma'ishna chakiros or ma'ishna bedikos. What's the difference by chakiros? If the person says I don't know, we throw out the testimony. But by bedikos, if he says I don't know, we accept the testimony. So Amrulay, so they said back to him, Hachi Ashta, what kind of comparison are you making? But chakiros, when it comes to chakiros which involve the time and the place, Amar Echad Eini Yodei, if one of them says I don't know, Edusun Betela, there we have to say that the edus is nullified. Tehavela edus she'iyata yachol hazima, because now that's testimony that can't be falsified. The only way you make someone an eid zomim is you say that you were with us in a different place at that time, so we need to know the place and the time. If he says I don't know, it's edus she'iyata yachol hazima, it's considered testimony that cannot be falsified. We cannot accept that testimony. But when it comes to the bedikos, which are the particulars of what occurred, Amar Echad Mehen Eini Yodei, if somebody says I don't know, Edus Kayemis, that's still considered accepted testimony, because Edus Shata Yachol Hazimo, because it's still Edus that is able to be falsified. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Lahu, he said back to them, Yachi, if so, Amrisu ba tuva Amrisu ba, you've actually said a lot. You've said a good comment with regards to Sanhedrin. Amri le, so they said back to him, Mitivuse demar, Amrinan batuva, because you've been generous, that's why we said something good, but minizihuse demar, but let's say you would have responded harshly, Lo Amrinan bavalo chada, then we would not have said anything. And Rashi explains, Tuva Amrisu ba, you said a lot, Harbe yesh lechem taimim ba, you have a lot of reasoning that you've added over here. And they said back, Mitivuse demar Amrinan batuva, machmas shata tova onav, because you're good and humble, umodelanu, when you admit to us, anu omer baharbe, that's why we're saying a lot. But minizihuse demarim, ha'isa rotza lahasros banu, ulahakshos, but if you'd be difficult to us, if you'd ask on us, lo hayinu yodem negdech klam, we wouldn't know anything, we wouldn't be able to respond to you if you were being combative. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, the Mishnah said, Echad Omer v'chulu, the Mishnah said that if the Edom have a discrepancy by one day, then we can still accept their testimony. It's possible that one of them didn't know that the previous month had an extra day, or didn't know that the previous month did not have an extra day, and that would explain the discrepancy. But if they have a discrepancy of 2 days already, so then we do not accept their testimony. And the Gemara says, Ad Kama, until how long into the month do we assume that a witness is not aware of when Rosh Chodesh was? Amar Rav Acha bar Chanina, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Acha bar Chanina says that Rav Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ad Rubo Shel Chodesh, until the majority of the month passes. Once you pass the midpoint of the month, then it's assumed that everybody knows what date it actually is and when Rosh Chodesh was, and even if they'd be off by 1 day, we would not accept their testimony once the majority of the month passes. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Zafana Nami Tanina, this is indicated also in the Mishnah itself, because it said, Echad Omer b'shlosha v'echad Omer b'hei edusun b'teila. If one says it happened on the 3rd of the month, and one says it happened on the 5th of the month, then we say that their testimony is nullified. V'yamai, now why should it be nullified if we say that people don't know when Rosh Chodesh was? Maybe in the previous 2 months, one of them didn't know exactly when Rosh Chodesh was. One of them knew about the previous 2 months that there was an extra day. The other one did not know that, and so they can be 2 days off as well. Rather, is it not because once the majority of a month passes, then everybody does know what the date is, and therefore this kind of discrepancy, you can only accept it within 1 day, but it can't extend. You can't have a discrepancy more than 1 day. But the Gemara continues, not necessarily. It could really be that I'll say to you that even when the majority of a month passes, a person doesn't know exactly what the date is, because he doesn't know when Rosh Chodesh was. However, uveshipura yada, what he knows is he hears that shofar that's blown that indicates when it's Rosh Chodesh, and bechad shipura amar detoy, we can say that he made a mistake in one Rosh Chodesh, one shofar blast, he made a mistake. But betray shipura, but to say already that 2 months of shofar blasts, 2 months of not knowing when Rosh Chodesh was, lo amar detoy, that we're not going to say he made a mistake on. So it could be the entire month the person is unaware, but we only accept that for 1 month. We will not accept that for 2 months. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav Acha bar Chanina, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav Acha bar Chanina says that Rav Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ad kama mevorchen ala chodesh, until when in the month can we do birchas hachodesh or kiddush hachodesh? When can we make the blessing on the new moon? Ad shetismali pegimasa, until it fills its flaw. And the Gemara says, V'kama, now how much is that? Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi says that Rabbi Yehuda says at Shivitz, until the 7th of the month that we can do kiddush hachodesh. Nardai Amri at Shisha Asr. Nardai says Nardoi, they say, until the 16th of the month. And Rashi explains, Zacha tismale pigimas, until it fills its flaw. Aval basar hachi, once that certain amount of days passes, lo shaykh lememer mechadesh chadoshim. You can't say that it's a new month anymore. Shari kvar no shenesi, at that point it becomes old. That's what it means that it fills its flaw. It means it's considered to be already like an old moon, so to speak. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph.